would look back at this time as an inspirational decade. Although I was at the centre of the spiritual bloom and innocence of the 60s, I was also part of the turmoil and decadence of the 70s and 80s. My marriage to Mick Fleetwood, founder member of Fleetwood Mac, brought me to the forefront of rock and roll, of fame, money, drugs, and heartache. I struggled in the darkness, searching for my own voice, before finding a light at the end of the tunnel. Aged 37, I went to college and studied psychology, where I gained a better understanding and came to terms with my life and my actions. Having spent so much of my life in the company of many of the greatest musical legends, those who influenced our culture to this day, I finally found my own creative ability, my own sense of self and purpose. This is what I learned along the way. Chapter 1. 60s London. I remember vividly the first time I heard of the Beatles. It was a normal Saturday in November 1962, and I had recently turned 15. My friends had given me a lift home after a morning of walking around Wimbledon and listening to our favourite 45s in the local record shop. Just before I opened the door, Love Me Do came onto the radio. That was it. "Turn it up," I shouted, my hand still resting on the door handle of the car. It was a never-to-be-forgotten moment. Something new and completely different had just arrived. Everyone stopped what he or she was doing or saying. The music was turned up, and we all stared at the radio. The sound of voices singing in harmony and the wail of a harmonica pinned me to my seat. A wave of happiness ran through my veins. Everything about this song, even the simple words, ignited my imagination. "Who are they?" I asked. "The Beatles," someone answered. I smiled, enchanted with the idea of a group being named after an insect. Little did I know then that I was listening to a band of musicians who were to go down in history as defining the 60s. Nor could I have imagined that in just over a year my sister would play a part in the Beatles film, A Hard Day's Night, or that she would become George Harrison's girlfriend. Pattie had left home the year before, and I missed her dreadfully. I had 4 other siblings, but she and I were the closest. Pattie now worked as an apprentice at the Elizabeth Arden beauty salon. This meant that she could afford to leave home and share a flat with one of her girlfriends. We were frequently in touch, and I would visit her in Chelsea, or she would come home for Sunday lunch with her photographer boyfriend. It was while Pattie was working at Elizabeth Arden's salon that a client had suggested she should get an agent and become a model. She sprung to fame after being seen on a television commercial directed by Richard Lester, who was later to direct the Beatles film Hard Day's Night, advertising Smith's crisps. "Smiths have crispness in the bag," she said, her eyes wide open and blonde bouffant shoulder-length hair flicking up at the ends. Now that her modelling career was launched, she became increasingly busy, frequently appearing in magazines and catalogues. One afternoon, I was in the sitting room at home when I heard the phone ring. I could hear my mother's voice in the kitchen and knew at once it must be Pattie. Her voice got higher and louder, finishing off with, "That's so exciting! I'll tell the others." She appeared in the doorway smiling. "Pattie's been asked to audition for a small part in the Beatles film. And not only that," she said, looking at my younger sister Paula and me, her eyes glistening as she held her breath, "she's got the part. She has to be a fan and dress up like a schoolgirl." Photographs of the Beatles filming appeared in every newspaper throughout the weeks that followed, including Pattie with a smile on her face, her long blonde hair and wearing a school uniform either on set during Hard Day's Night or standing behind George's chair with a comb in her hand. It was during this time she told me that George had asked her out. She was in a dilemma and didn't know what to do since she already had a boyfriend, but the pull was strong and the feelings were mutual, and so she and George began their love affair.